Mystery still surrounds the case of two Saudi sisters who were found dead along the banks of New York City's Hudson River last week, bound together by duct tape in what appears to be a double suicide. It's being reported that the sisters had said they would rather kill themselves than return to Saudi Arabia. According to the Saudi Consulate General, 16-year-old Tala Faria and her 22-year-old sister, Rotana, had been living in Virginia for the last 2 to 3 years. Before their disappearance, the sisters were living in a shelter due to abuse allegations. Last week, the New York Times reported the Saudi embassy in Washington had called their mother to inform her that her daughters had applied for asylum. The kingdom is now also pushing back on reports that it has ordered that anyone related to the sisters return to the kingdom. In response, the Saudi embassy has called that claim, quote, absolutely false, and that details are still under investigation and will be shared in due course, end quote. The NYPD has said that at this point, a crime did not take place in New York City, but that the sisters' deaths were still under investigation. Here with an insider's view into how investigators are piecing together this case at One Police Plaza is retired NYPD Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher. Dr. Porcher, welcome back to the program.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure, Jenna. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. An incredibly somber case that investigators are looking at. And it seems like there's so many different threads as to where this can go. So given what I just said in the intro, what is it that investigators, you would say, will most likely be working on right now?
Well, this is a very complex issue. And one of the things that I revert back to when I was a detective in the NYPD, drowning investigations are very difficult. When I say very difficult, when we think of the post-mortem effect that a body takes on in the water is very different than the post-mortem effects that the body takes on when they're on the ground. Generally speaking, rigor mortis kicks in, I want to say maybe 2 hours after the person passes away, and that's in a warm climate. But when the body is in the water, it now decreases the body temperature and it now expands the time that rigor mortis would kick in. So that post-mortem result is very essential for law enforcement, because what that'll tell them is when the possible time of death occurred. And when we can backtrack the time of death, that can more or less lead us down the pathway of some possible issues or instances which may have caused the death, where the person was. One of the things that we look to as law enforcement is, was there any video that we can look to where these two individuals were either taken into custody or where they lost their lives? One of the things that we have here, and this is an uncorroborated source, but there was a jogger that was in the park, because this happened off of 68th Street and Riverside Drive, right off of the Henry Hudson River. The jogger stated that he saw the two girls. They were approximately 30 feet apart, and they were in prayer. But he never saw them into the water. That's something that the NYPD would take into account when doing the investigation. And then we also look back at their financial records. I want to say their credit card records from the time that they were here in New York. There was an excessive spending, so to speak. They were staying at the Hyatt Regency Hotel, and what they did in the Hilton as well. And they actually maxed out the credit cards. So they were living in somewhat of a state of opulence. And what's interesting about a suicide, less than 30% of all suicides have a note that accompanies the death. So it's a lot of people looking at, well, because they were bound and they were in the water, it's just very difficult to make that, it's very difficult to make the assessment if these people were murdered. And the truth of the matter is, I don't believe that they were. We have two types of investigations. We have murder investigations and suicide investigations. The investigative path is very different for the two. We don't have any forensic evidence that has been introduced that would lead us to believe that this was an actual murder investigation. So just based on what we have, it appears to be a suicide.
Okay, but that's based on what we have, yet there's so many different threads that are being looked at, and one of them is information that is being garnered and isn't being garnered from the Saudi consulate. Now, we've already recently seen an incident where getting information was somewhat difficult. So how is that playing out into this case?
Well, one of the things is the two sisters it appears that they applied for asylum and they were denied. And all the same held true with the mother. The mother's asylum was denied here in the United States. So they were being called upon to come back to Saudi Arabia. That's something, and the Saudi government is refuting this. They're not giving us clear information in relation to their asylum requests. But the truth of the matter is, and there's also been statements from the two sisters that they would rather die than go back to Saudi Arabia. This is uncorroborated information, because this is information that's coming from people that have passed away, and we don't have anything written or a verbal, something that's verbally videotaped that support that conclusion. So we have to go with what we have. And all based on the forensic that I've seen, it appears to be a suicide. One of the things we take in consideration in doing a suicide, an investigation for a drowning victim, water in the lungs. And it appears that there was water in both of the girls' lungs when they were in the water. And in addition to that, we don't have signs of trauma to the body. When conducting a postmortem investigation, one of the first things that we look to is the eyes of if a person dies on land, the eyes are one of the first points of the body, first body ports that you'll see an evaporation of water or liquid, so to speak.
Oh,
so
really?
what you'll see is the eyes will become condensed based on the evaporation of the water in the eyes. So even if a person is dumped in the water, that state of the eyes does not change. And so that's a telltale sign that this was more than likely a suicide, and the person was dumped in the water because we didn't have that issue where the eyes evaporated when they were on land.
Well, it's a very tragic story, whatever the outcome is of the investigation. But I want to thank you for joining us and giving us some insight and understanding into how investigators are able to determine something so difficult and yet seemingly confusing, at least on the surface, to people who aren't in the NYPD. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jen. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely.